President Trump has pardoned some of his most loyal allies from the 2020 era, all accused of trying to aid in his efforts to overturn the 2020 election results when he lost the White House to Joe Biden. On the pardon list, former Trump attorneys Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell, as well as the president's former chief of staff, Mark Meadows.
They're not saying more at this point, and you're right, this is quite a lengthy list, 77 names in all, many of whom will be familiar to anyone who's been kind of following this saga for the last 5 years. The president's pardon attorney posted the paperwork on social media last night.
Something important happened in the Senate that's causing quite the stir. 5 notable Republican senators voted for a war powers resolution aiming to limit Trump's ability to act on military matters in Venezuela. And let me tell you, Trump did not take that news well at all. Think major outbursts on social media and frantic phone calls coming straight from the White House. He warned these senators that they might never hold office again, labeled them as traitors, and accused them of betraying both America and his administration. Naturally, this led to a lot of chatter about whether this marks a turning point for the Republican Party. Could this be the start of them distancing themselves from Trump?
Next week, they'll debate whether the president needs congressional approval to take further action against Venezuela.
I've been trying to do this since September to get the Senate to take seriously the issue that we shouldn't send our sons and daughters into war without consultation, debate, and vote in Congress.
Are we on the brink of a Senate revolt? Well, let's slow down a bit. In reality, the answer is no, not really. What occurred was a specific vote on a singular issue, just 5 senators making a procedural stand on war powers. It wasn't a grand rebellion or the dawn of a widespread movement. It was simply a few senators saying no to one particular thing.
But it still just underscores President Trump's efforts to kind of rewrite the history of the 2020 election. And I'll just read for you a little bit of the sort of preamble, which is pretty striking when it describes its intent here.
It says, "This proclamation ends a grave national injustice perpetrated upon the American people following the 2020 presidential election and continues the process of national reconciliation." And to tick through some of the names here, Rudy Giuliani, of course, the former New York City mayor, who helped lead the effort to pressure states.
5 Republican senators who voted in favor of that resolution.
If the president and the Department of War should feel the need to put ground troops, boots on the ground into Venezuela in the future, then I think under the Constitution, the Congress would need to vote on that.
But here's the exciting part. The real story isn't just about individuals. It's about the broader political landscape. The fact that 5 Republican senators showed the guts to defy Trump on this issue is noteworthy. They publicly voted against him, even knowing the possible backlash from him and his social media presence. This says a lot. It indicates that there are limits to Trump's grip, even within his own party.
And instead, Donald Trump and too many of our Republican colleagues are saying, let us spend our treasure and maybe even American lives on Venezuela and other areas far afield.
Not every Republican is going to toe the line all the time, and some members are willing to take a stand on specific issues. For Trump, this must be a bit concerning. Sure, he still has a hold on his party, and they mostly stand united. But this vote about Venezuela is worth noting. It reveals the fault lines in the Republican Party, showing where the pressures lie and what issues could disrupt party unity.
The president is calling them losers and disasters after they voted with Democrats to limit military action in Venezuela without Congress.
It's just crazy. I don't get it. Then you have Lisa Murkowski and you have Susan Collins. Disasters. It's like, why are they against the attack on Venezuela? They're against the attack after they found out it was the most successful attack, probably the most talented, most brilliant tactically attack that we've had maybe in 100 years.
The 5 senators who voted for this resolution are Josh Hawley, Lisa Murkowski, Rand Paul, Susan Collins, and Tim Scott. If you know anything about Senate politics, you'll recognize that some of these names are not surprising. Susan Collins, for instance, has been challenging Trump for years. So there's this interesting mix within the Republican Party lately. We have some moderate voices, like the senator from Maine who tends to vote based on her conscience. And then there's the senator from Alaska who's pretty independent-minded and doesn't shy away from going against her party's leadership. Then there's Josh Hawley, which is quite the twist because he's usually seen as a loyal Trump supporter, part of the whole MAGA crowd. So, when he opted to vote for this particular resolution, it certainly caught my attention. Rand Paul also joined in on this vote, which was kind of expected given his libertarian background. He's all about limiting military interventions and sticking to constitutional boundaries when it comes to presidential power. That's his jam. It's also worth mentioning Tai Young, who I didn't see coming, but he has a history of taking congressional prerogatives and war powers quite seriously. When we look at what happened, it's a fascinating blend of moderate Republicans, libertarian Republicans, and even some Trump-aligned folks coming together for one cause. They pushed forward a war powers resolution that would require Congress to approve any unilateral military action by Trump in Venezuela. This move is especially significant given the backdrop of the volatile situation there and Trump's desire to act fast without Congress getting in his way. Now, there's a genuine constitutional debate here about whether the president can just make those military moves solo or if he actually needs Congress to sign off. But instead of engaging in that discussion, Trump was more interested in pushing his agenda. When these senators stood in his way, even in a procedural sense, he didn't hold back. He took to True Social, labeling them as traitors and declaring they'd never hold office again, claiming they were betraying America. He even sent White House staffers to call and politically threaten them. Naturally, this led to chatter about whether this could signal a bigger rift within the GOP. People started wondering if this would be the moment Senate Republicans would finally say enough is enough regarding Trump's antics. But the reality, while a bit less thrilling, is that this was more of a one-off situation. It was just 5 senators taking a stand on a specific issue, not the beginning of a broader movement or revolution. No wider accountability or uprising occurred among their peers. It remained a singular event. So, there's been some tension within the Republican Party recently, which might just change the landscape of their politics a bit. Following a recent vote, Trump was pretty upset. The senators faced a bit of backlash, but ultimately life pretty much moved on. Overall, the Republican Party stayed united on most issues, especially when it comes to significant topics like deportations and immigration enforcement, where Trump still holds a strong grip. Now, while this vote is certainly noteworthy and hints at some limits to Trump's power, it's not exactly the game-changing shift that some people were hoping for. Let's break down what war powers really mean and why this vote is so important. A lot of folks might not grasp the constitutional aspects at play here. This isn't just some situation involving Venezuela or Trump merely wanting to take action while 5 senators oppose him. We're talking about a core question regarding constitutional authority. Who actually decides whether America goes to war? Is it the president acting solo under Article 2 of the Constitution? Or is it Congress which holds the purse strings and the power to declare war under Article 1? This debate has been going on for centuries. The founders discussed it. It's come up during the Vietnam War and in Iraq, and it's still a hot topic today since the Constitution isn't crystal clear on this matter. Presidents generally prefer to have maximum flexibility to respond to threats swiftly. Congress, on the other hand, wants to maintain its constitutional role as the body responsible for war decisions, creating a constant push and pull between the two sides throughout America's history. Trump's argument is rooted in Article 2. He believes he has the inherent executive power to direct military operations as the commander-in-chief, meaning he doesn't need Congress's approval for every action. He's all about having that flexibility, the ability to act fast in emergencies and responding to threats without waiting for Congress to deliberate for ages. This is a common argument made by presidents from both parties, Republicans and Democrats alike. They claim that the world is a dangerous place. Things can escalate quickly, and the president needs the ability to maneuver without Congress micromanaging every military decision. So, yeah, it's all about giving the president some space to operate. But then again, Congress and those 5 senators certainly have their own perspectives. So here's the scoop. A group of 5 senators took a stand, making a clear point that when it comes to conducting full military operations, like if we were to do something in Venezuela against Maduro's government, Congress needs to give the green light. They're highlighting the idea that there are limits to what the president can do on his own, especially when it involves putting American troops in danger. The Constitution is pretty clear about it, and these senators believe that's what separation of powers means, as provided by the Founding Fathers. What makes this situation especially interesting is that these senators are not just voicing their disagreement with Trump's Venezuela policy. They're arguing he doesn't have the legal authority to act without Congress's approval, which is a significant distinction. They're saying he's crossing a line. Now, Trump's response, classic Trump, He basically waved off their constitutional argument, claiming they were wrong, and even called them traitors for questioning him. He took to his social media platform, Truth Social, to express that these senators had betrayed America. There were threats circulated by White House officials hinting at primary challenges for these senators. And naturally, he resorted to name-calling and personal attacks. That's just typical of how Trump operates. When someone challenges him, he goes straight for them, trying to intimidate them into regret. But here's the catch. Despite all the drama, the vote on the resolution still went through. Life carried on. Trump continued to be the most influential figure in the Republican Party, and the party largely remained aligned with his agenda. Those senators who backed the resolution did face some backlash from Trump supporters, sure, but it didn't end their careers. They weren't immediately targeted for primary challenges or kicked out of the caucus. Congress continues to work with them, and even with 5 senators stepping out against him on this issue, Trump maintains his grip over the party. So this didn't mark a major shift in Trump's relationship with the Senate. It was a noteworthy moment, but just one moment in the grand scheme of things. So let's talk about a moment in early January 2026, right in the thick of Trump's second term. He was feeling pretty good, still holding on to control of Congress, and his party was mostly on board with his big goals. Deportations were in full swing, and the border issue was front and center, uniting the party behind him. The economy was also ticking along nicely. So even though 5 senators decided to vote against him regarding Venezuela, it wasn't exactly a sign of a big uprising against Trump in the Senate. There weren't waves of opposition rising up, nor was there a faction of Republicans gearing up to challenge him on various fronts. It was just 5 senators making a stand on one topic. Now, if Trump were looking weak with his party splintering and numerous senators revolting on various issues, then we'd definitely be looking at something more significant. But that's not the case here. Plus, remember, the Republicans had just wrapped up an election. And with midterms on the horizon in 2026, many of these senators were considering their own political futures. They were weighing how they'd fare against a primary challenger backed by Trump, something he's made pretty clear he could do. If they vote against him, he'll support someone to run against them. That's his ultimate power play, keeping everyone in line. So when you see 5 senators willing to go against him despite that looming threat, it means something. Either they don't think the threat is legitimate or they really believe in their stance enough to take a chance. But still, it's a small number of dissenters, not a sweeping rebellion or a break in the party. On top of that, Trump's reaction shows a lot about his style and what matters most to him. He came out hard against those senators, labeling them as traitors and promising primary challenges to them. He attempted to scare them off. But the reality is he still maintains solid control over the party when it comes to the issues that really count for him. You know, when it comes to things like deportations, immigration enforcement, and border security, the Republican Party is really solid. They've got those topics on lockdown. Same goes for judicial nominations, tax cuts, and deregulation. Trump's not looking for absolute loyalty on every single issue. Instead, he's focused on keeping the party aligned on the stuff that really matters to him. Now let's take a closer look at that recent vote regarding Venezuela. What it really shows is that this was more of an isolated incident rather than the start of some grand revolt against him. 5 senators decided to back a war powers resolution, which definitely ruffled some feathers. Trump wasn't happy about it. But let's be clear, that was pretty much the end of it. No wave of senators jumped on board, and there was no wider movement to limit his power. After that, the Senate returned to largely supporting Trump's agenda. The House did the same, and Trump kept tight control over his party when it came to the big issues. So, if you were holding out hope that this was the moment the Republicans were finally going to confront Trump and start demanding some accountability, you might want to rethink that. This wasn't a turning point at all. It was just 5 senators standing up on one constitutional matter. The other important takeaway is that despite that minor defection, Trump's grip on the Republican Party is still pretty powerful. Sure, he got angry and he definitely threw around some harsh words calling those senators traitors, but in the grand scheme of things, the party is still firmly behind him. They're still backing his agenda and voting together on significant issues. While this vote shows that Trump isn't all-powerful, it also makes it clear that he still has control. He can handle having 5 senators go against him on Venezuela because he's managed to keep everything else in line, especially when it comes to deportations. It's quite something how the party is locked in on judges and the economic agenda. A little defection on war powers isn't really shaking up his foundation. Sure, it annoys him and might be a bit of a hassle, but it's hardly a threat to his power. The interesting part here is what this tells us about the true priorities of the Republican Party right now. They've rallied around issues like deportations and immigration enforcement. While 5 senators chose to break away on the matter of Venezuela, this really highlights what the party is focusing on and what Trump has managed to make the centerpiece of their agenda. When it comes to immigration, border security, and culture war topics, they are all on the same page, unified as a party. But war powers, especially related to Venezuela, is where you see the cracks. That's a space where some senators feel comfortable stepping away from party loyalty due to constitutional concerns. So, if you want to figure out where the GOP stands nowadays, the key is to look at their unifying points versus what divides them. Right now, Trump's immigration agenda is definitely their glue, while military interventions and questions about war powers are what create some division. Now, here's a thought that deserves some attention. Trump wasn't shy about sending White House officials to challenge those senators, even going so far as to call them traitors on True Social, threatening that they wouldn't hold office again. That's his classic move. However, a noteworthy detail is that many of those senators are still seated. They're not out of the Senate and they didn't get primar. They're sticking to their posts. Despite Trump's attempts to intimidate them using his clout, it didn't turn out the way he had hoped. Senate seats are tough to flip in many states. Even with Trump supporting a primary challenger, the incumbent senator has serious advantages like name recognition, funding, and established infrastructure. So, while Trump's threats carry weight and are certainly impactful, they don't always yield the results he's looking for. This really paints an intriguing picture of his limitations that often goes unnoticed. The reality is that those 5 senators are presenting a constitutional argument stating that the president shouldn't have the authority to act without Congress. Trump, on the other hand, calls them wrong and labels them traitors for daring to question him. But that's just where things stand. These senators make a valid point based on the Constitution, which does grant Congress the authority to declare war and play a role in military decisions. It's really not about being traitors or anything partisan. They're taking their constitutional duties seriously. There's actually quite an interesting debate among constitutional experts about whether Trump is correct or if these senators have the right of it. It's not really black and white. It's more nuanced. And yet Trump seems to take it as a personal affront, almost like he's feeling betrayed. This situation gives us a glimpse into the early days of Trump's second term and reveals the true divides within the Republican Party. We're starting to see what can rally the party together and what really drives them apart. Some Republicans are stepping up to vote based on their own beliefs, while others seem to prefer towing the party line. It's also clear how Trump reacts to dissent within his ranks. He doesn't handle it gracefully. His go-to move is to strike back at those who disagree, using his influence to intimidate or punish them. Yet, he seems to understand that occasionally some senators are going to break away from the majority as long as he can keep the focus on his key agenda items. He can tolerate these small rebellions on less critical issues. Looking ahead, I think we can expect more of the same. Trump will continue to push his agenda, and Congress will likely pass most of what he wants. However, on certain topics, particularly around war powers and constitutional matters, we'll probably see some Republicans willing to vote their conscience instead of simply aligning with the party. When that happens, you can bet Trump won't hold back in criticizing them. He'll probably post about it on True Social and threaten to challenge them in primaries. But unless dissent grows into a larger movement, it probably won't shift the trajectory of either the administration or the party. So if you're hoping for a real Republican uprising against Trump, this recent vote regarding Venezuela, isn't it? It's just a handful of senators standing up on one particular issue. It's clear that there are some cracks showing in the Republican Party. There are members willing to stand up and voice their opinions when it really matters, which indicates that Trump's hold on the party, while very strong, isn't completely unbreakable. There are limits and boundaries. And on certain issues, the party doesn't just stick together out of loyalty. They actually vote based on their principles. Now, even though Trump's second term is firmly within his grasp, we have to remember it's not a dictatorship. There are still institutions in place, and Congress hasn't just rolled over. It's also important to acknowledge that there are Republican senators who genuinely take their constitutional oath to heart. This may not completely halt Trump's desires on the biggest issues, but it definitely creates some tension. Take the recent vote on Venezuela as an example where the party didn't act as a cohesive unit. In the long run, if Trump ends up making too many enemies within his own ranks, it could turn into a real issue for him. For now, though, his power remains strong and the party remains mostly unified. This situation with Venezuela is just a small blip on the radar.